and welcome to God's Hookups television show. This is Dr. Barbara Young, your host, and this is a show that features up close and personal interviews with guests from all walks of life who share their stories about unexplainable blessings, successful events, and extraordinary miracles and encounters that can only be of God's hookup. You will receive hope, enlightenment, encouragement that will feed your spirit and your soul. Now, to my guest today. Welcome, Christopher Rausch. How are you?
What's happening, Dr. Barbara? I'm fantastic. How are you doing, darling?
I'm so happy to have the No Excuses Coach on the show today. Listen, my listeners and viewers out there, Christopher is debatably one of the world's most effective and impactful, unstoppable No Excuses coach, speaker, workshop facilitator, retreat leader, whose life apprenticeship of victim to victor is nothing short of miraculous and surely inspiring. So today, you're going to hear a story that's going to knock you off your feet and get you going and up and doing something about your life. Christopher, I am so excited because you usually captivate and enthrall the audiences with your story. So today, you are on to share your God's Hookup story today. Welcome to God's Hookups.
Wow, Dr. Barbara, thank you so much for an awesome introduction. I'm excited to be here as well. And I'm just so inspired by everything that you're doing out in the world. So thank you for what you're doing and sharing your passion and your love with this show. So thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm excited.
I'm excited. Yeah. I like that. No excuses. You know, you obviously live your message and you leave so many people inspired and I guess sort of awestruck and motivated to take action. So that's one of the reasons why I want to have you on the show, because during this time, and it seems like things may be more challenging than they were even a month or two ago. And so as we look at people who are despairing, who are fearful, who are doubtful, go get them, Christopher.
Well, awesome. No, thank you so much, Dr. Barbara, for allowing me to be here and to share my story. Yeah, I mean, literally, like you said, I walk my talk because of the situations that I've been throughout the different periods of my life. And I look at things, honestly, as things happening for me and not to me. So I don't have that victim mindset, because oftentimes if we think that things are happening to us, then we don't see the value in some of those low times that cause us to be able to grow and to become stronger. So, yeah, I mean, it's just all about the perspective. And that's one thing that's really helped me in my life to be successful, is that perspective shift.
Wow. Well, tell us about your God's Hookups and how all of that happened. I mean, because you've had several, so you got to narrow it down to one or two. I know.
Yes. And it's really challenging to narrow it down to one or two, but I'm going to go with the one that like I always free fall into conversations. I don't plan anything out. And so the one I want to share today is about a gentleman named Bill White. It's kind of a little backstory on that. I grew up in a very interesting situation, a very interesting family dynamic. I knew my mom, but I didn't know who my biological father was. He was otherwise married and had a family at the time. So you can kind of put those two pieces together. And my life up until probably about 6 or 7 years old was pretty chaotic and very uncertain. I grew up in a very poor neighborhood, physical violence, mental violence, a lot of abandonment issues early on in life from my mom, from my sister, from, of course, my biological father, and most other people in my life. And it wasn't until, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my mom met this guy and I thought he was going to be my dad and I thought everything was going to be great. We were going to move to this middle-class place here in Southern California. And unbeknownst to me, my mom's psychological issues were a lot deeper than I thought they were, and came about the time I was 13 years old. I was just starting the 7th grade, and I came home to find us being evicted from our house. My mom's boyfriend had left, my sister had left, and it was just me and my mom, and she didn't pay the rent. So for the ensuing 4 years, I was literally a homeless 7th grade dropout, living in the backseat of a station wagon with 18 cats and 2 dogs, fighting for my life every single day. And by everybody's account, I should be either a drug addict, an alcoholic, in jail, dead, or otherwise successful like I am. So it's just been through the blessings of the universe and my tenacity and my ability not to quit that has arrived me in the position that I'm in right now. But I don't think I would be in this position if I did not have that hookup from Bill. And that situation came about was that I had to make some very tough decisions while I was homeless. I had to make a decision to leave my mom in that situation because she was not doing anything to get us out of it. And I was literally having guns put to my head. I tried to commit suicide twice. Fortunately, I sucked at it. I was almost carjacked one time. I was drinking, drugs, violence, everything. And I was only 17 years old. And so I knew that there was only a couple of paths out of this situation for me. I was either going to die, I was going to go to jail, or I was going to succeed. And I knew that either one of those situations were my choice. So I chose to leave my mom in that situation. I didn't leave her. I still went back there and helped her. We lived in this horrible motel for a while. And so I had to get on with my life. And by me making that decision, I wound up meeting this great girl of mine. She actually became my first wife, Tammy. And then she's like, I really didn't have much aspiration for my life at that point. I was working 3 jobs. I was just trying to get by. And she wanted me to meet her parents. And I was like, I had long hair, smoked cigarettes. I'm a 7th grade dropout. I've dug in dumpsters. I mean, I don't consider myself very much of a like an up class. My mom always told me we were middle class, whether we were homeless or not. It was like a mindset. And so she's like, I want you to meet my dad. And she was like the prom queen and all this other stuff. And so I met this guy and I was scared to death that he was going to say, you can't date that guy. He's from the other side of the tracks. And, God's hookup was the fact, and I get chills when I think about this. He never looked at me for what I looked like. He looked inside of me to see who I was and who I could be. And through his mentorship and through his guidance and through his love, for the ensuing few years that we were married, we just developed a bond. He wound up having some major talks with me. And at one point he said, hey, Chris, why don't you think about going back to school? Because his daughter was in school. She was a senior in high school. We were 18. And I said, go back to school. Are you crazy? I haven't been to school since the 7th grade. I don't know. I missed high school. No, I'm working a telemarketing job and I'm working a part-time construction job and I'm doing whatever else I can. He's like, no, you can go back and get a GED. I'm like, what the heck's a GED? And he's like, general equivalency diploma. You go back, then you can go to college. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, this guy doesn't know me. My mom called me stupid for most of my life. I was bullied by my mom. I was bullied by my sister. I was bullied by the kids in school. I didn't have any confidence. I had a little bit of self-respect and a lot of drive. And I think he saw that in me. And so through that opportunity, because I did love his daughter, I still love his daughter. I think she's a sweet person. We're still friends. We've been divorced for like 30 years. She's friends with my wife. It's crazy. I have an amazing life, amazing life. And he believed in me. He believed in this kid, living in an apartment with 4 other guys, having a mom who was living in a motel, all this other stuff. And so I did it. I went back and got my GED. And surprisingly enough, I did it in like 6 weeks.
Wow.
So, and my mom said I was a pretty brilliant person, but I just never harnessed into it. She would call me stupid all the time, but said I was brilliant. So it was really an oxymoron. But so I got the GED. And what's interesting, Barbara, is that all my friends told me I was stupid to go get smart. And it was one of those points in my life where I was like, okay, this guy doesn't even hardly know me and believes in me. And here are all my quote unquote friends who are trying to keep me down. And that was a lesson that I had to learn, because I was like, if I want to become successful, I can't keep associating with the same people. I have to associate with people who are smarter and brighter and bigger than me. And through that journey of knowing him, I got into college and I wound up getting my master's degree. And there's so much stuff in between. I literally have books worth in between that. But that's my God's hookup. I mean, he was just an amazing individual who looked at me and believed in me. And from there, I took what he taught me and applied it and became successful. And now I give it back to all the people that I serve in my communities.
Were there any, you had so many challenges that, Chris, and listening to your story, that you had to overcome. But it sounds like, you weren't completely defeated, because you still, when you said this, you had a bit of self-respect, and somewhere within you, there was something, that drive, and that led you to go back and get that GED. Were there challenges even when you got into college? Did you, and you got a bachelor's degree, and I'm assuming you went to college here in Southern California somewhere.
Yep. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Were you challenged by some of your professors because you were smart?
Because I was smart?
Yes.
In both situations, yes, I was challenged, both because I was smart and then also because I was not very smart, especially with math. So it was challenging for math, algebra, calculus, statistics, finance. I literally went to school from the age of 18 until I was 31, pretty much nonstop, aside from my bachelor's degree. After I got that, I took a break before my master's degree because I was like, and I was like, why not? I want to be a homeless guy who has a master's degree. I was like, I'm driven. Let's do this. But yeah, I mean, and I look at any challenge in life is something, if you have that viewpoint that's happening for you, then that's a way you can look at it and be excited about it. It's like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to overcome this? What resources can I pull to be able to either prove that person wrong or prove myself right, or whatever it is that I need to get over this obstacle to get where I'm going? And most people retreat, or they come into pity, they go into that safety zone, the comfort zone, or whatever it is. But for me, I just looked at it as like, okay, I used to say there's another person I have to prove wrong. But now that I'm older, I used to say success is the best revenge, but now I say success is the best karma, because I just live my life like that. I'm just happy for every experience, good or bad. Even this time during COVID and everything else, it's made me a stronger person. It's made me a more loving person towards society. I was more angrier when I was younger because I was frustrated and I didn't understand. But now it's just about love.
That was one of my questions, Christopher, is how that you were able to transform from all of this anger and all of this, you were bullied, you were beaten up, your mom, how you were able to harness all of that into love, because that is what a lot of people deal with today. And a lot of it undergirds it is forgiveness. So how were you able, without the help of divine intervention, help you forgive so that you can love? Because my philosophy is that you've got to empty out before you can receive.
Yes, ma'am.
So how did you do it? What happened?
That is a great question, Dr. Barber. That was a great question. I told you before, I love great questions. So yes, what did I have to do? You said the word, I had to forgive. It took some therapy. It took a ton of self-development books, a ton of videos, a ton of courses. But I started looking at the keys of what were the components that people were happy, and what are the components of people who are miserable. And I'm like, okay, the people that are miserable haven't forgiven. They hold on to things as though it's a rite of passage to say, hey, this is why I'm a victim. I was bullied. I was beaten. I was sexually abused. I was this. Here's my label. Here's my moniker that says why I haven't done the things that I want to do. And when I got to this book, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I remember reading, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Right.
And I remember getting to that. And I'm like, it was really an epiphany for me, Dr. Barbara, because I was like, seek first to understand, then be understood. I spent my entire life with my mom, who had to be right about everything, had to be right. And I saw what that did. Because if you feel you're right in your soul of souls, and you want to prove somebody wrong, that puts somebody on the defensive. That puts somebody in a reactionary state. That puts somebody in a fight or flight. And I was like, okay, how about seeking first to understand? So the first person I sought to understand was my mom, because I was angry with her. I was frustrated with her. I mean, we were homeless, and she had 18 cats and 2 dogs, and she couldn't get rid of them so that we could go have an apartment, or that I could go back to school. It was always about choices that didn't involve me and involved herself and her animals. And I was like, what's wrong with me? And in addition to the bullying and everything else, I had to figure out, I'm like, I can't go through the rest of my life like this. So let me seek first to understand. And my mom used to always tell me, she goes, I'm 4 years old. I'm 4 years old. I'm like, Mom, you're a grown adult. You're 40 something years old. Come on with that. And as I was reading that book, I'm like, seek first to understand. I'm like, what happened in it? And understanding child psychology too, because for my coaching, I wanted to figure out where the root cause of what screws us up happens. And it's often between the ages of 0 and 5. So I was like, what happened to my mom that made her like this? And she kept saying she was 4. And I'm like, 4 years old. Her parents divorced when she was 4 years old. Some other things happened when she was 4 years old. I'm like, she grew up screwed up too. She didn't have the right mentors. She didn't have the Bill Whites in her life. And she read self-development books, but she did it in such a way that it actually poisoned her perspective instead of enlightening her perspective. So I'm like, and I tell this to people now today, it's one of the most powerful things I can say to people when they get frustrated with somebody else. I'm like, if you went through somebody else's experiences, if you walked in their footsteps, you had the people in your life that they've had in their life, might you be just like them? And people sit there and say, you know what? I never thought about that. I'm like, if I'd have gone through my mom's steps and gone through what she went through, might I have been like her? It doesn't make it right, but it makes it where I can understand. It's like, it wasn't my fault. I was just a kid that showed up. She was going to put me up for an adoption, but she decided the last minute not to. She already had a bunch of miscarriages and abortions back in the 60s. And I was just like, okay, I forgive her. I forgive her. And I started thinking, okay, I have to forgive myself because I thought I was the cause of the bullying. I thought I was the cause of all those things. And so once I started forgiving myself and started actually loving myself and taking care of myself and not punishing myself, that's when the doors opened. And I just started seeing more love in the world and just started seeing like anger only begets more anger and winds up in jail or whatever. I said, and just trying to find that path. And it was not easy, but it definitely now the point I'm at, I love everybody. I think everybody has a great soul. I think honestly, well, I shouldn't say everybody. I think 80% of the world is really, really awesome. And I think 10% just need a whole hell of a lot more love than the other 80%.
They probably need to do what you did, an exploration, seek first to understand, then be understood. And so I think that one of the other intriguing questions I had on your journey when you were exploring in college, what kind of courses were you navigating? Were you navigating towards psychology, sociology? I mean, really to find some answers in the bachelor's and the master's, maybe not so much the bachelor's, but in the master's. What did you major in?
My major in master's was organizational management. So it wasn't an MBA because I'm not a numbers person, like I said. So I went for the MAOM, which is more on the people side of things, because
Yes.
as much as I realized my mother hated people I was like, okay, I need to understand people. We need people in our life. And I loved leading people. And from my experiences, I started mentoring at a young age and mentoring younger kids. And one of the greatest experience I got in my life, honestly, Dr. Barbara, was I was invited to go speak at the junior high school that I dropped out of in the 7th grade. It's actually a video on my YouTube page. So I got to go back and speak to the 7th and 8th graders and tell them my story and tell them, hey, I was just like you guys. I was sitting in those very same bleachers being bullied. I was, even in 7th grade, I was doing drugs. I was skipping school. And I'm like, you guys are going to go on a journey. I get chills when I think about it. It was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I'm like, you guys got this. And afterwards, these kids were coming up saying, I'm homeless right now, or I was living at Olive Crest, which is a children's foundation I support, blah, 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 blah. And it was just absolutely phenomenal. But in those classes, the first class I actually took in college was an interpersonal communications class.
I figured as much.
That's the first one they gave me. And I was like, a communications class? I know how to talk. This is stupid. And I go in the class and I was blown away because one of the biggest lessons that I learned at that early age, I was like 19 or 20, was again, I've been learning seek first to understand. And now I learned to really listen, not just hear, but to listen, to be able to paraphrase back to somebody and say, Dr. Barbara, here's what I heard you say, and have that person get it. And seeing the lights and the whistles go on, like somebody gets me, because we're all often trying to prove and we're trying to, seek first to make people understand us. And I'm like, these things all tie together. So it set me on the trajectory of wanting to always help people. So yeah, sociology was big, psychology was big, philosophy was big. And I wound up getting the business degree because I was already in business, but it was never my zone of genius. It was my zone of excellence, being a leader and being in corporate for so many years. But it was all about the pursuit of what's my zone of genius, which has been coaching and mentoring and speaking and books and shows and stuff like that. That's where I'm just at my best. I just love it.
Well, see, Christopher, all of that is a God's hookup, because there's no way that all of these things would have happened to you. And I think one of the things that really spoke, and I think to resonate with the listeners out there, that here's a young man dropping out of school and then going back to the school and talking to the 7th graders. I mean, that would have been, I was almost about to cry, because I could just sense the moment that you were there, and to bring back what you had gone through and to share this with these youngsters. You tell me there's not a God. We go through things and we experience things so that we'll be able to share with others. Without our experiences, what can you give? I used to say nothing in, nothing out. So a lot, yeah, you don't have anything in there, you don't have anything to give. But out of the experiences that you had, but learning to listen, art of communication, because that's the quickest thing. And of course, it probably made you a better partner in marriage.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. And so now here you are on stage. But I like also something else you said, and I'd like you to kind of maybe give a few of some of these success tidbits that you would give at the concluding of a speech, because you talked about the distinction between, you found out what are the traits of happy people, and what are the traits of miserable people. Of course, we know there's a tagline that says unforgiveness is the big banner. But yes. Chris, what would you like to say in your heart today to those viewers out there who may be where you were or who may be stumbling around because all of a sudden this pandemic has brought things to a screeching halt in my life. Where do I go? How do I pick myself up? And I'm sure you have these questions posed to you all the time. Why are you so unique? Do people ask you that? Sure they do.
Oh yes, I've had people tell me, Dr. Barber, I've had people tell me quite a few times, well, Chris, you're an anomaly. You're special. And I'm like, it actually irritates me more than I take it as a compliment, because I'm like, I'm not. I'm not. I was not. No. I'm just a guy that never stopped, that always kept saying, after I had Bill in my life, you know, it was really an eye opener, because I hadn't really had anybody, my grandfather a little bit, other people, you know, intervene in my life. But it wasn't until that moment in time, that juncture, where I was like, wow, if this feels really, really good to have somebody care about me. So in answer your question, you know, what would I say? There's so many different things, because I'm constantly telling people on my shows the same way. Everybody is unique. You're all unique. You all came with a gift. We all came with a gift. And it's all about choice. It's all about attitude. Bill said to me, and this is a beautiful thing. He said, Christopher, you're only limited by the parameters of your own mind. Again, I want to say that you're only limited by the parameters of your own mind. If you think you can, if you think you can't. Again, Henry Ford said that quote, one of my favorite quotes. And his family actually blessed me with taking that quote on and putting it as my own name, because he's been passed away for many years now. I got the opportunity to hold his hand as he passed away years after I was divorced. It was an amazing experience. I was so glad I was there to hold his hand, because that was my thank you to him for everything he did. And I hope I don't get choked up. It was truly a very emotional experience. So what I tell people is that you're capable of so much more. You know, it's about the people you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with people who tell you that you can't, and it's wrong, and to play it safe, and to be comfortable, and to do the things that, you know, these people want you to do, then you need to get different people. No matter where it is or who you're doing, what you're doing, you need to get around people who believe in you. You need to have that ability and that tenacity and that drive to be resourceful. So many people aren't resourceful right now. I didn't have Google and YouTube in my world. Google and YouTube, there is literally nothing you cannot achieve. It blows my mind when I had somebody tell me the other day, they're severely overweight, and they told me, they're like, Chris, I don't know how to cook healthy. They told that to the No Excuses coach. I'm like, Google how to cook healthy, and then stick with it, be consistent with it, have that commitment, have an accountability partner. But in these times, really, you have to get resourceful. You have to get hungry, as Les Brown says. I got to spend some time with the famous Les Brown for a few days. It was absolutely amazing. But, you know, it starts with you. It starts with the accountability mirror. It starts with asking yourself, if you're doing something that isn't conducive to where it is that you're going, you have to ask yourself the question, am I going to be happy with this decision that I'm making right now, tomorrow? Because often in the moment, we're looking for the short-term gratifications versus the long-term results. So we're looking for that quick fix, that quick serotonin rush, all those different chemical rushes, you know, whether, you know, it's gambling or Netflix or Facebook or whatever your addiction is. We're going to that versus going to what it is that we need to be doing. So I invite you guys out there, if you're struggling, the best way to know where you're going is to have a plan. And the best plan to have is to know what your legacy is. So this is the exercise for you guys watching. Write your eulogy. Write your eulogy. I know it's painful. I know people want to talk about death, but I wrote my eulogy back in 2008, and it was an unbelievable experience. I knew I was spot on when I got to the end of it, and I started crying when I wrote it. And the last part I'll share with you was, Christopher Rausch will have fought for what was right and what was fair. Christopher will have risked for which that mattered, and he will have left the earth a better place for who he was and what he did. And when I said that, tears coming down my face, I'm like, I know what my mission is. I know what my purpose is. And from that point on, I've just immersed myself in education, in reading books and talking to people and listening to experts and watching who is happy and who is not happy and making those risks. You know, there's no reward without the risk. And the comfort zone is a fallacy. We're not going to reach this place of euphoria when we get older, like we get to retire. I mean, Dr. Barber, you're a massive example of that. You're rocking and rolling. You're okay. What do I got to do? I got to reinvent. I've been telling everybody during this COVID time, this is the time to get stronger. This is a time to heal your family. This is a time to really realize what it is that you want to do in your life so that you don't have those regrets, because regrets at the end of the day are what you're going to live with when you're older. And my plea to you guys is to make sure that you know what your dreams are, that you're going after them, and that you do everything in your power to use pain as leverage to not stay in the place that you're at.
Christopher, I can't thank you enough for sharing with the listeners out there because, and viewers, I should say. I'm so used to radio, and I'll say my listeners, but to my viewers out there, I can't thank you enough because what you have said today has inspired me even more so, and inspired, I know, the viewers out there. There is a way, and I don't care what kind of background, what kind of circumstances that you came from, you can overcome. You can get through anything. And if anything Christopher said, I mean, it's like reading books. He did work. It's work to be successful. It takes work. It takes commitment. And like he also said, which I will second, getting away from those toxic friends, being around people who are going somewhere. So this is a time, and I want to thank him again for sharing his heart. And for those of you out there knowing that there's a God, there's a creator, and I don't care what you're going through, whatever, God will hook you up. Look at all the hookups. There comes Bill White. Is that his name again, Christopher?
Yes, Bill White.
Bill White, who didn't look at this youngster with, negativity and despair. He looked and saw the spirit of that young man. So the soul of that young man. So I will say to Bill White and the Bill Whites that many of you can become out there to encourage someone. And if you see someone homeless and you see somebody that is in need, give them a word of encouragement. This is the time for us to bind together because we're in this together and we're going to get out of this together. I'll tell you, one way or the other. I love it. I love you, Christopher. I can't thank you enough for being with me today. You are fantastic. I'm going to get another show. Woohoo!
No blush. Thank you so much. No, it's certainly a privilege. Certainly a privilege.
Well, this has been really my delight to have you on the show today, really. And so for all of you out there, be sure, remember, God is in the hookup business and he's still doing it today.